The marble floor of the bank lobby is spotless. Polished. Quiet. Too quiet. A single ID card slides across the counter. Then drops. Clack. It lands face down on the floor. For half a second, no one breathes. The bank manager doesn't bend to pick it up. Doesn't apologize. Doesn't even look down. Instead, he exhales sharply, annoyed. "You people always make things difficult," he says, loud enough for the line behind her to hear. The woman standing at the counter doesn't move. She's in her late 60s. Simple clothes. Hands folded politely in front of her. She stares at the ID on the floor. The manager taps the counter with his pen. "Pick it up," he says. "I don't have time for this." The narrator's voice is calm. Measured. He thought he was dealing with nobody. A few customers shift uncomfortably. One woman looks away. Another glances toward the security guard, who does nothing. The older woman bends down slowly. Her knees crack softly as she reaches for the ID. Before her fingers touch it, a voice cuts through the lobby. "Don't." Every head turns. A man has just stepped through the revolving doors. Tall. Well-dressed. Calm. Not angry. Not loud. Just controlled. He walks forward, eyes locked on the manager. The older woman freezes mid-bend. The manager scoffs. "This doesn't concern you, sir." The man stops beside her. Gently, he picks up the ID himself. He looks at it. Then at her. "Mom," he says quietly. "You don't have to do that." The word hits the room differently. "Mom." The manager laughs, short, dismissive. "Oh, please," he says. "You expect me to believe?" The man turns the ID over in his hand. Then he looks up. "No," he says calmly. "I expect you to believe what happens next." The narrator doesn't rush. In that moment, the deal was already dead. He just didn't know it yet. The manager straightens his tie, annoyed now. "If you're not conducting official business," he snaps, "you need to leave." The man nods. "Oh, we are," he says. He pulls out his phone. One tap. Then another. Across the lobby, the security guard's radio crackles. The manager notices it too late. "What is this?" he asks, irritation creeping into his voice. The man finally smiles, not warmly. "This branch," he says, "was one of 3 finalists." The manager frowns. "For what?" The man steps closer to the counter. Close enough that the manager can see his eyes clearly. "The $5 billion liquidity transfer," he says softly. "The one your regional director has been begging for." The room goes silent. Even the pen stops tapping. The manager's face tightens. That's confidential," he says. The man nods again. "So is how you just disqualified yourself." The older woman finally straightens up. She doesn't look embarrassed. She looks disappointed. The narrator delivers the line, slow and precise. "He threw an ID on the floor and buried a $5 billion deal with it." The manager swallows. "You're bluffing," he says, but his voice isn't convincing anymore. The man doesn't argue. He just turns toward the exit. "Come on, Mom," he says gently. "We're done here." As they walk away, the security guard suddenly steps aside, clearing the path. Behind the counter, the manager finally looks down at the floor. At the empty space where the ID had been. And for the first time, he understands. The narrator closes the section. This wasn't about paperwork. This was about respect. And the cost of losing it. She never liked banks. Not because she didn't understand them, but because they always made her feel small. Her name was Evelyn Carter. A retired school librarian. 38 years of service. Perfect attendance for almost 2 decades. She believed in rules. In order. In waiting your turn. That morning, she dressed carefully. Neutral colors. Clean shoes. Her best coat, the one she only wore for important errands. She wasn't there to ask for anything special. Just to update an account. A simple verification issue. Her son had offered to come with her. She refused. "I'll be fine," she said. "I've done harder things than this." And that was true. She'd raised a boy on her own. Worked 2 jobs when she had to. Taught him how to speak clearly, listen carefully, and never assume the world owed him kindness. Especially not because of his skin. The bank lobby felt colder than it should have. Too bright. Too clean. The kind of place where mistakes feel louder. She waited her turn. Smiled politely. Handed over her ID without hesitation. She didn't know the man behind the counter. Didn't know his name. Didn't know his title. She just knew his eyes never really met hers. When the ID fell, it wasn't thrown violently. That's what hurt the most. It was casual. Dismissive. Like dropping something that didn't matter. For a moment, she wondered if she should pretend it hadn't happened. She'd done that before. You learn to, when correcting it costs more than enduring it. Her knees weren't what they used to be. Bending down wasn't easy. But she did it anyway. Because that's what she'd always done. Then she heard her son's voice. "Don't." She knew that voice. Had known it since he was 5 years old, and afraid of the dark. Firm. Protective. Controlled. When she looked up, he was already beside her. Evan Carter. She didn't see the CEO. She saw the boy who used to wait outside the library after school. The teenager who worked weekends so she wouldn't worry about bills. The man who never raised his voice, because he didn't need to. He picked up the ID like it was fragile. Like it mattered. When he called her mom, something inside her tightened. Not pride. Relief. She hadn't failed him. She hadn't raised a man who needed to shout to be heard. As they stood there, she noticed the shift in the room. People were watching differently now. Listening. The power hadn't changed. The context had. Evan didn't mention titles. Didn't explain who he was. He never did. Because the people who mattered already knew. And the ones who didn't were about to find out. As they turned to leave, Evelyn touched his arm. "It's okay," she whispered. "I don't want trouble." He smiled gently. "I know," he said. "That's why I'm handling it." The narrator's voice settles in, calm, grounded. She didn't raise him to seek revenge. She raised him to demand dignity. They walked out of the bank together. Slowly. Quietly. No shouting. No threats. Behind them, the manager stood frozen, unaware that the worst part wasn't the arrest that would come later. It was the realization already taking shape. Because this wasn't about an ID. It was about how someone treats a person when they think no one important is watching. And now? The most important person in the room had seen everything. And beat, emotional lock. Evan Carter didn't look back. He didn't need to. He already knew one thing for certain. That bank would never touch his money. And soon, they'd understand why. His name was Mark Reynolds. Branch manager. 12 years with the bank. 3 plaques on the wall behind his desk, all slightly crooked, all carefully polished. He liked order. Not the kind that helped people. The kind that reminded them who was in charge. Mark had learned early that authority didn't come from intelligence. It came from tone. From pauses. From making people wait. He ran the lobby like a checkpoint. Smiles for people who looked important. Short answers for people who didn't. And Evelyn Carter? She had registered as background noise. When Evan and his mother walked out, Mark didn't feel panic. He felt irritation. The kind that comes when someone refuses to stay small. He adjusted his tie. Cleared his throat. And turned to the security guard. "Make sure they don't come back," he said casually. The guard hesitated. Just for a second. Mark noticed. "Company policy," he added. The words he used whenever he wanted obedience without questions. The guard nodded. Mark felt the familiar satisfaction settle in. Control restored. Or so he thought. That afternoon, Mark fired off an email. Not angry. Not emotional. Polite. Professional. He flagged the incident as a disruption. Noted uncooperative behavior. Suggested that the account associated with Evelyn Carter be reviewed for compliance. Nothing illegal. Just pressure. That was his specialty. By evening, he was still confident enough to joke about it during a manager's call. People love playing victim these days, he said with a chuckle. Try running a bank sometime. A few nervous laughs followed. No one challenged him. Power trips don't need applause. Just silence. The next morning, Mark arrived early. He liked being first. The quiet office made him feel important. Coffee in hand, he checked his inbox. One new calendar notification. Urgent, Regional Director, 10 a.m. He frowned. Then another email arrived. Subject, Liquidity Transfer, Status Update. Mark's pulse ticked up slightly. This was the deal he'd been waiting on. The one that would fast-track his promotion. The one everyone knew about. $5 billion. He smiled. This was his moment. At 9:58 a.m., his phone rang. Regional Director. Mark answered instantly. Good morning, he said cheerfully. There was no greeting on the other end. Instead, a question. Mark, the director said slowly. Do you remember a customer named Evelyn Carter? The smile froze. Mark laughed lightly. Of course. Minor incident yesterday. Already handled. Silence. Then the director spoke again. Mark, he said, why did our largest prospective client forward me lobby security footage? Mark's throat tightened. What footage? He asked. Another pause. Longer this time. The footage where my client's mother's ID is dropped on the floor, the director said. And your voice tells her to pick it up. The room felt smaller. Mark swallowed. That was taken out of context, he said quickly. She was being disruptive. The director didn't argue. He just delivered the line that changed everything. That disruptive woman, he said, is the mother of Evan Carter. Mark's blood drained. The name landed heavy. Too familiar. Too late. The director continued. He's pulled the deal, he said flatly. All $5 billion. Mark opened his mouth. Nothing came out. And Mark, the director added, he requested that you understand why. The call ended. Mark stared at his phone. At the desk. At the plaques. The narrator's voice slides in, calm and unforgiving. The power trip was over. The consequences were just beginning. Mark Reynolds didn't leave his chair for a long time. The office felt louder now. The hum of the lights, the faint ringing in his ears, the ticking clock on the wall that suddenly sounded accusatory. $5 billion. Gone. He told himself there had to be a fix. A call. A clarification. He straightened his tie again, a nervous habit now, and dialed the regional director back. Straight to voicemail. He tried once more. Same result. His inbox refreshed. New messages appeared faster than he could read them. Compliance review initiated. Client withdrawal, immediate impact assessment. HR inquiry scheduled. Mark's confidence didn't shatter all at once. It cracked in layers. First denial. Then panic. Then the slow, sick realization that this wasn't a negotiation. At 10:23 a.m., two people walked into his office without knocking. Internal audit. Compliance. No smiles. No small talk. Mr. Reynolds, one of them said, taking a seat. We need to discuss an incident reported yesterday. Mark forced a chuckle. This is all being blown out of proportion. The compliance officer didn't respond. She placed the tablet on the desk and tapped the screen. The lobby footage played. Clear. High definition. No missing context. His voice filled the room. Pick it up. I don't have time for this. Mark watched himself say it. Watched the ID fall. Watch the woman bend down. Watch the moment the room changed. No one spoke when the video ended. Do you deny this occurred? The auditor asked. Mark swallowed. No, he said quietly. Another tap. Another file. Email logs. Internal notes. His message flagging Evelyn Carter's account as uncooperative. You attempted to restrict her access after the incident, the auditor said. That was procedure, Mark replied quickly. Disruptive customers. The compliance officer raised a hand. Procedure does not include retaliatory flags, she said calmly. The word retaliatory hit harder than felony ever could. By noon, the branch felt different. Staff avoided his office. Whispers replaced greetings. The security guard wouldn't meet his eyes. At 1 p.m., HR arrived. At 1:15 p.m., Mark was asked to surrender his access badge. Temporarily. At 1:16 p.m., he knew it wasn't temporary. The narrator's voice remained steady. Power doesn't disappear loudly. It fades quietly, one privilege at a time. By the end of the day, the numbers came in. The $5 billion transfer wasn't just lost. It had triggered a domino effect. 2 secondary partners paused negotiations. A third withdrew interest entirely. The branch's quarterly forecast collapsed in a single afternoon. Mark sat alone in the break room, staring at a cold cup of coffee. His phone buzzed. A text from his wife. What's going on? People are talking. He didn't answer. Across town, Evan Carter sat in a different kind of office. Glass walls. Minimal decor. He watched the same footage once, and only once. Then he closed the file. This isn't about revenge, he said calmly to his legal team. It's about standards. One of them nodded. The bank understands, she said. They're preparing a formal response. Evan didn't smile. He didn't need apologies. He needed accountability. Back at the branch, Mark packed his personal items into a cardboard box. The plaques didn't fit. He left them behind. As he walked past the lobby for the last time, he glanced at the counter. At the spot where the ID had fallen. The narrator delivers the line, slow and precise. He thought he'd controlled the room. What he really controlled was his own exit. Mark Reynolds spent the night awake. Not panicking. Calculating. That was his strength, or at least it used to be. He replayed the day in fragments. The call, the silence, the looks from staff who used to greet him first. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. It was a collapse. By morning, he'd convinced himself of one thing. This was still fixable. He dressed carefully. Chose his best suit. The one he wore when he needed to look credible. At 9:02 a.m., his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. Mr. Reynolds, a woman said calmly. This is legal affairs from the bank's corporate office. Mark exhaled, relieved. Finally. A conversation. We're conducting a formal review, she continued. As part of that process, we need you not to contact any clients involved. Mark stiffened. Involved? He asked. Yes, she said. Especially the Carter family. The name burned. He nodded anyway. Of course. The call ended. Mark stared at the wall. The truth settled in slowly. This wasn't damage control. This was containment. Across the city, Evan Carter sat with his legal team. No raised voices. No anger. Just documents laid out cleanly on a glass table. This is straightforward, his attorney said. Public accommodation laws. Discrimination standards. Corporate negligence. Evan listened. Then he asked one question. What's the cleanest path? The attorney didn't hesitate. Transparency, she said. Let them investigate themselves. We document everything. Evan nodded. Good, he said. No theatrics. Because he understood something Mark didn't. When institutions are forced to choose between truth and reputation, they choose survival. At 11:30 a.m., The bank's PR team drafted a statement. We take these matters seriously. We are reviewing internal conduct. By noon, internal emails leaked. Not by accident. Patterns emerged. 3 prior complaints about Mark Reynolds. Dismissed. Minimized. Archived. Evan's legal team didn't leak them. They just didn't stop the process. The narrator's voice is steady. The moment Mark tried to fix the situation had already moved past him. Mark's phone buzzed again. This time, it was HR. We're placing you on administrative leave, the representative said politely. Effective immediately. Mark closed his eyes. For how long? A pause. Until further notice. When the call ended, Mark finally understood. This wasn't about intent. It was about pattern. Across town, Evan's team prepared the next step. A formal withdrawal letter. A compliance request. A civil notice. No press conference. No interviews. Just systems doing what systems do when pressure is applied correctly. Evan stood by the window, looking out over the city. His mother sat nearby, quietly folding her hands. I didn't want trouble, she said softly. Evan turned to her. I know, he replied. That's why this stops here. The narrator closes the section. He didn't plan revenge. He planned resolution. Mark Reynolds didn't plan to confess. Confessions are for people who feel guilty. He felt cornered. 3 days into administrative leave, his phone rang again. This time, it wasn't corporate. It was compliance enforcement. Mr. Reynolds, the investigator said, voice neutral. We're finalizing our report. We just need clarification on one point. Mark leaned back in his chair. Go ahead. There are discrepancies between your written explanation and the video, she said. Specifically regarding intent. Mark scoffed softly. Intent? He repeated. I didn't intend to humiliate anyone. The investigator paused. Then why did you instruct the customer to retrieve her ID from the floor? Silence. Not the dramatic kind. The exposed kind. Mark rubbed his temple. I was under pressure, he said. High-volume day. People were watching. Exactly, the investigator replied. Mark frowned. What? You were aware others were watching, she said. Yet you proceeded. The words settled in. She continued. And afterward you flagged her account. That was standard procedure, Mark snapped. Another pause. Then the line that ended everything. Mr. Reynolds, she said. This call is being recorded. Are you stating you retaliated because she embarrassed you in front of the lobby? Mark opened his mouth. Closed it. He hadn't meant to say it. But exhaustion strips strategy away. Yes, he said quietly. She challenged my authority. The recorder captured it all. Across the city, Evan Carter received the update. One sentence. He admitted motive. Evan read it once. That was enough. By the next morning, the bank released an internal memo. Not public. Not yet. But absolute. Mark Reynolds, termination for conduct violations. No ceremony. No farewell email. Just removal. The branch manager who once controlled the room was now a liability the institution needed to erase. The narrator's voice remains calm. Power doesn't protect you when it becomes evidence. Later that afternoon, Mark was invited, politely, to return company property. Laptop. Access card. Keys. He signed the final document with shaking hands. The HR representative didn't look up. Do you have any questions? She asked. Mark swallowed. What happens now? She hesitated. No, she said. Legal determines exposure. That word echoed. Exposure. At the same time, Evan's legal team filed the civil notice. No accusations. Just facts. Timeline. Footage. Admission. The bank responded within hours. They didn't fight it. They settled. Quietly. Generously. Mark Reynolds didn't see a courtroom. He saw something worse. LinkedIn notifications stopped. Recruiters disappeared. His name became searchable, for the wrong reasons. He sat alone at his kitchen table that night. Same house. Same silence. Different future. The narrator delivers the final beat of the section. He lost his job for how he treated a woman he thought didn't matter. And he lost his career for admitting why. The bank lobby looked the same. Same marble floors. Same glass counters. Same security guard at the door. But something invisible had shifted. A new manager stood behind the counter now. Different tone. Different posture. When Evelyn Carter walked in, she was greeted before she reached the desk. "Good morning, ma'am," the teller said warmly. No hesitation. No edge. Evelyn nodded politely. She hadn't come to reclaim dignity. She'd never lost it. She came to close an account. Across the city, Mark Reynolds watched the same bank from his car. He didn't go in. He couldn't. His name no longer opened doors. It closed them. The settlement paperwork arrived quietly. No headlines. No press conference. Just numbers and signatures. Enough to cover damages. Enough to make a point. Evan Carter signed without comment. He didn't celebrate. He didn't need to. The outcome had already said everything. At home, Evelyn poured tea and folded the letter from the bank. A formal apology. Carefully worded. Legally sufficient. She placed it in a drawer and forgot about it. Because she had something better. Peace. The narrator's voice is steady. Justice isn't loud. It's permanent. Mark tried to move on. Applied to other banks. Other firms. No one called back. Not because of rumors. Because of records. Compliance notes don't fade. They follow. The plaques from his old office sat in a box in his garage. Still polished. Still crooked. Still meaningless. Meanwhile, Evan returned to work. New partners. Different institutions. Ones that understood a simple truth. How you treat people when you think they don't matter is exactly how you'll be judged when it does. One afternoon, Evelyn received a call. "Your new account is ready," the banker said kindly. "No fees. Full access." Evelyn smiled softly. "Thank you," she replied. She hung up and looked out the window. Nothing dramatic had changed. The world hadn't apologized. It had adjusted. The narrator delivers the final line, calm, reflective, victorious. He threw an ID on the floor to feel powerful. In the end, he cleaned out his own future. A pause. Then the moral lands. Respect costs nothing. Disrespect costs everything.